Now, hey, can you say something?
Hello.
All right. Let's do this. Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boys, Jake and Carl, back again
Hello.
with the Great Gatsby. Right now, we're gonna be talking about the Great Gatsby and relating it to the American Dream. All right, so let's first go around the setting. The Great Gatsby takes place in New York, and within the New York Bay, there are these two landmasses on each side called the eggs. And the East Egg represents old money. Tom and Daisy live there. Those are characters. And the West Egg represents new money. Jay Gatsby lives there. And the Valley of Ashes represents the poor. It is literally a valley full of ashes. There are piles of ashes there, and it's filled with poor people. The characters who live there are Myrtle and George Wilson.
Okay, so to get a better understanding about what we're going to talk about today, we should probably first discuss about the history. So this took place in the 1920s, also known as the Roaring Twenties. So the New York status back then were catered to gender stereotypes, where the man would work to earn money for the women to spend on themselves. The men were dominant towards the women, and women were seen to be pure and gentle. Conforming to society, these women were treated as objects instead of people. During the time, women were trying to be more independent as well, going against the stereotypes by cutting their hair short and not marrying at a young age. So in the Roaring Twenties, we see a lot of parties, economic growth, and observed prosperity. However, despite the prosperity and all the wealth, not everyone was happy, and not everyone was prosperous, referring back to the Valley of Ashes. As we will later see in this podcast, this book was sort of made as a statement on society during the Roaring Twenties, as well as the American Dream.
Alright, so now we're going to be going over the characters in the book. The first character is Nick Carraway. He is our narrator, and in the beginning of the book, he makes this statement which sort of gives a background of how he feels about the whole situation. So the first thing he says that because of what his father had told him when he was younger, he is an unbiased narrator, meaning he doesn't judge, right? So, and however, after this, he says that, oh my goodness, that the characters in this book make him reach his limit of tolerance, except for Gatsby. So all the other characters in his book, in his eyes, are bad, except for Gatsby. So let's talk about Gatsby. Jay Gatsby, he was born into a poor family, and his real name is James Gatz. He wasn't satisfied with his life, and he wanted to change his status. This quote from the book shows how he felt. His parents were shiftless farm people, and his imagination had never really accepted them as his parents at all. And his imagination hadn't accepted his parents because they were poor. So he had changed his name to Jay Gatsby, and this represents how in the beginning of the movie, Gatsby had put up a facade, a fake backstory. He had claimed to be born into a rich family and that he was part of the old money. And after growing up, he met this rich guy named Dan Cody, and through him, he was able to learn how to become rich and how to have the etiquette of a rich person. He had a relationship with Daisy, another character that Carl will talk about, and before going into World War I. And he met Nick, the narrator, during the war. After the war, he focused his life on going back together with Daisy, even though Daisy had moved on and married Tom. So through illegal activities, he was able to build himself up into a rich person and bought the house across Daisy's house in the West Egg, which, as I said earlier, represented new money. He believed through this money, he could bring back the past and get back together with Daisy. His goal of getting back together with Daisy was symbolized with a green light he could see on Daisy's dock from looking at oh my goodness, a green light which he could see on Daisy's dock by looking at it through his house. And as we will discuss later, this goal of his, of turning back time and trying to get back together with Daisy, would eventually lead to his downfall.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about this complicated couple, Tom and Daisy. We see Tom, as we read in the book, he was not much of a likable person. He was kind of difficult. He was kind of difficult to sympathize with. On their honeymoon, Tom has already cheated on Daisy. He continues this act by currently having an affair with Myrtle. He does not care to hide his affairs, and he actually shows pride in it. Daisy, however, learned how to live with knowing that she's being cheated on. When they went to a party, she even gave Tom a pencil so that he could take the addresses of some ladies. She also conformed to the gender stereotypes, as we can see in this quote where she talks about her daughter. Quote, "And I hope that she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world." End quote. Both born rich, the book never really mentions them having to work, unlike Nick and Gtasby. This kind of shows the superficiality of the rich. They have a carefree life. They enjoy life, but maybe a bit much. We see this kind of enjoyment lead to problems with trust and their marriage. As we will soon see, the carefreeness would negatively affect the other characters later in the story. Now we'll talk about the other couple in the book, Myrtle and George. They both are poor. They live in the Valley of Ashes, actually. Myrtle tries to upgrade her status by having fun in an affair with Tom. When she went with Tom to a party, she tried to fit in with the rich upper class. We can see this through her actions of buying a dog and an expensive dog collar just for the party. She also looked down at her husband when she was talking about him. She said, quote, "He wasn't fit to lick my shoe," end quote. And through this quote, we can actually see that she wasn't very likable, similar to our opinion on Tom. And we don't really get much information on George. Well, we know his profession. George is a mechanic for Tom's car. He does not have a very active social life, aside from his wife. Jake will talk about now the effect of their actions and real-life application.
Alright, so throughout the story, there are two things that cause tensions to rise. So as Carl mentioned earlier, Tom was having an affair with Myrtle, and George, Myrtle's husband, had found out that Myrtle was having an affair. However, he did not know who it was with. It was also revealed to Tom that Gtasby was trying to get back together with Daisy. So these were the two tensions that were rising throughout the book. And these tensions were released during this accident that I'll talk about. So while Daisy was anxious after an argument with Gtasby and Tom, she ran over and killed Myrtle while she was in Gatsby's car. Actually, we'll just say it's Gatsby's car. And George, Myrtle's husband, was devastated, and he had believed that it was Gtasby who was the one that killed Myrtle, even though it was Daisy, and it was Gtasby who had an affair with Myrtle, even though it was Tom, because Tom had told him so. He was not in the right headspace, and he ended up killing Gtasby and then took his own life at the scene of the crime. This tragedy of itself is a statement on the society during the time of the Roaring Twenties and sort of brings out the bitter truth of the American dream. So first, Gtasby. Gtasby represented the new money, as we talked about earlier. He had brought himself up from poverty in order to win back Daisy. He believed that money would bring him happiness. He rejected his poverty and tried to change his social status, starting over by changing his name from James Gatz to J. Gtasby. He had become so fixated on Daisy and ended up dying for it. Another sad part of this was that during Gatsby's funeral, only Nick, Gatsby's dad, a random guy from one of Gatsby's house parties, and Gatsby's servant were there. Only 4 people were there in his funeral. Despite all of his wealth, none of his business partners, none of his quote-unquote friends, except for Nick, were there for him when he died.
Wow, Jake, that is extremely sad. We see Myrtle and George represent the poor. They were not able to get out of poverty, and when Myrtle had tried to by having an affair with Tom, both her and her husband ended up dying. Tom and Daisy represented the old money. They were both rich and lived without a care. unlike all the other characters, they never really worked hard for it. Even though Tom and Daisy had facilitated Gatsby, George, and Myrtle's death, since Daisy had ran over Myrtle and Tom blamed Myrtle's death and affair on Gatsby, they did not seem to care. They just went off living their lives as if nothing happened. Now, how is this story relating to the American dream? Well, first of all, the American dream is basically that an idea that through the American economy and through capitalism, everyone has an equal opportunity to become successful. The Great Gatsby shows the bad aspect of America, where some people are not able to become successful, like Myrtle. Being with Tom symbolized her wanting to be higher in the social rank. And Gatsby, who was trying to get with Daisy to have the perfect family and the perfect wife with his giant mansion, just like the American dream, right? So then Tom and Daisy, who are the rich who inherited their wealth, seem to be the only people who came out of the story unharmed. Many who lived in the Valley of Ashes wanted to be rich and have that social status. Myrtle tried to get it through Tom, and Gatsby tried to get it through Daisy. It showed how money cannot buy happiness. In this case of Gatsby, even though he was able to amass so much wealth, he still ended up dying to reach his goal, which was Daisy. The tragedy of Gatsby's death shows a common flaw people make when they try to realize the American dream for themselves. Now, how does that make you feel, Jake?
Well, Carl. I mean, I think you should say your part first, and then maybe I could say my part.
So we can see that they became too focused on the goal. We see that Gatsby devoted himself to be with Daisy, believing that would make him truly happy.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes people think that all their fulfillment and all their happiness in life comes from accomplishing that goal, just like Gatsby.
Yeah, sometimes people just waste their lives, not really enjoying it in order to achieve their goals that they think would make them happy, but it turns out it probably wasn't the thing that made them happy, or would make them happy.
So what can we learn? First thing is that you need to learn to be happy with what you have. It's okay to strive for better things. We all should strive for better things, but we shouldn't think that instant happiness comes from achieving those goals.
So basically, what we're saying is that we should just enjoy life. Dedicating ourselves to that one goal may not always bring happiness. Instead, live in the now. And sometimes it is important just to be happy with what you have, knowing that some people might actually have it worse.
So that's it, guys. I hope you took something away from this, and I don't know, read The Great Gatsby.
It's a really good book.
Yeah,
I highly recommend. Me and Jake are out.
Peace.
Bye.